Phil and Anne's Good Time Lounge didn't survive even a year before it closed. It seemed like a doomed restaurant from the beginning, and we have a long list of why.
You know, when you're opening a restaurant, there's so many things that go wrong.
Anne Burrell and Phil Casaselli had been friends for years before they opened Phil and Anne's Good Time Lounge, but there didn't appear to be a whole lot of good times when it came to working together. Even best friends don't always find that they get along in a business setting. The conflicts grew to be so bad so quickly that they reportedly resorted to speaking to each other only through their attorneys, even while the doors were still open. There seemed to be a difference between expectations and reality when it came to these two. They assumed they were on the same page about opening the business, but they seemed to have different ideas about their roles and how well they would get along as business partners. Arguments over little things turned into a roiling fire. They disagreed on the business hours. One argument was about the music the restaurant should play. We understand why. Reviews said the noise was overwhelming when the restaurant blasted 90s boy bands. Another argument occurred when Casaselli had some out-of-town family members come in to try the restaurant, and they couldn't agree which menu the family members could use. Compromise just didn't seem to be a viable option for these two. When people go to a celebrity-run restaurant, they have fairly high expectations. So customers were especially disappointed to go to Phil and Anne's Good Time Lounge and find only mediocre food. One disgruntled customer even said Applebee's makes better food.
Ooh, sick burn.
There were lots of food complaints. Customers said the food was often oversalted, with some people finding their food too salty to even eat. Customers complained about everything from overcooked steak to dry fish. While some menu items were good, it seemed to be hit or miss overall, with most items eliciting a mere meh. For example, customers complained about a salad that came with chicken that didn't have any seasoning. Customers weren't all that thrilled with the cocktails either. We found a review complaining about a cocktail that tasted like cologne, and another saying that the restaurant even ruined a standard vodka and cranberry drink. Look, you can always chalk up bad reviews to ultra-picky customers, but one deterrent in stark black and white was the prices. Customers were often disappointed with what they got versus what they paid for it. One Google reviewer said, "The food was very casual bistro gastropub fare, and some of the prices were in the 30s, which in this neighborhood implies fine dining, which it was not." One customer who claimed to have spent nearly $100 said they had to go to a deli afterward because they were still hungry.
Hi, I need 2 turkeys, please.
Oh, you again.
Phil and Anne's Good Time Lounge didn't call its dishes small plates, but the idea was that you were supposed to share around the table. Burrell told Brooklyn Magazine, "We wanted to create a sort of grazing culture. It's how I like to eat when I go out with my friends. I always go heavy with the appetizers, and we have 1 or 2 entrees." However, when customers ended up paying a full-sized price for an appetizer-sized portion, they weren't too happy about it. Even though the restaurant had a fun atmosphere similar to a sports bar, the service wasn't always on point. While some people felt like the waitstaff was friendly and they had a good experience, others did not. Even when the restaurant just had a few guests, customers sometimes experienced ridiculously long wait times. There were complaints of the cooks leaving appetizers undercooked and not even offering to fix them. Even months after the restaurant opened, customers were under the impression that the people working there must be new and not know what they were doing. One Google reviewer called the service painfully awkward. Paired with what they called a lack of good food, they said they didn't see themselves returning. Meanwhile, a Yelp reviewer said, "The owner, an eccentric-looking woman with cockatoo hair, seemed to be drunk or somewhat high on something. She kept banging loudly on the counter by the kitchen." The customer was also annoyed that people who had wandered in wanting selfies took priority over the servers taking their payments so they could leave. A restaurant is nothing without its food. The menu at the Good Time Lounge was supposed to mainly be Mediterranean and Italian, but it was really a melting pot of cuisines and concepts. Burrell told Brooklyn Magazine that the food was inspired by her preferences, saying, "This is basically the food I want to eat, my favorite dishes, the things that when I go out, I wish I could have." So what would Burrell want to eat when she goes out? The menu contained a mixture of everything from Italian and Korean to American foods. It included lowbrow fare like pigs in a blanket and fried pickles coated in Cheetos, as well as higher-end options like dry-rubbed ribeye. The meatballs came with a side of dill pickles. While the egg sandwich seemed kinda fancy with chipotle aioli, it also came with American cheese. Customers who were looking for something original mainly found food they could get anywhere without any real standout menu items. items. A restaurant needs an item that pulls people in again and again, but customers didn't find such an item. Burrell didn't even have bolognese on the menu, which is her most popular recipe.
And we are ready to plate it. This makes it so aromatic.
Both customers and people in the neighborhood noticed that the restaurant never had a lot of people eating there. Customers who had bad experiences the first time around, or decided they could make the same food at home, just never came back. Even though representatives for Ann Burrell were adamant that the restaurant stayed busy, Phil Casaselli told Eater New York that such claims were absolutely not true. Casaselli said Burrell would sometimes saunter outside and sweep the sidewalk on a slow day at mealtime. She'd say, "This will bring people in," assuming that people would come in based on recognizing her as a celebrity. He said that the wrong type of people walked by and weren't enticed by her celebrity status. However, representatives for Burrell didn't agree with this portrayal of how things went down. Customers often walked in to find the restaurant empty. Customers reported that even on a Friday night, there might only be 6 people inside dining. One Yelp customer, who ultimately endured unsavory service and had a bad food experience, came in at 7:30 p.m. to an empty restaurant and said, quote, "Perhaps we should have taken it as a sign." Smith Street on Cobble Hill wasn't really hopping when Phil and Ann's Good Time Lounge moved in. For years now, new restaurants have come and gone in that area after failing to get enough customers to stay open. Surely a celebrity-owned restaurant could help bring new life to the neighborhood, right? Unfortunately, even that succumbed to the curse in what used to be Restaurant Row. The address at 196 Smith Street in Brooklyn, where Phil and Ann's Good Time Lounge was located, has seen many restaurants in less than a decade. It was char number 4 from 2008 to 2015. After char number 4 closed down, nothing seemed to stick around for long. Phil and Ann's was only open in 2017 and 2018. After Phil and Ann's closed down, the restaurant turned into a Japanese and Korean ramen restaurant called Ichiba Kitchen, which shuttered within months. Then it cycled through multiple names on the door before a dim sum restaurant called Dimmer and Summer took over the location in 2022 and is still open as of the making of this video. Hopefully the restaurant and its novelty robot cat food server Bella will have a better run than the other restaurants in this restaurant graveyard. Some long-term relationships don't survive a business venture, which is sadly what seems to have happened with Burrell and Casaselli. Burrell first met Casaselli at her favorite local bar in the West Village called Daddy-O, which Casaselli owned. In fact, it was Casaselli who reportedly suggested starting the restaurant when the property became available. The idea they had for the restaurant was that Casaselli would be in charge of the alcohol part of the restaurant and Burrell would handle the food. While the idea sounded good in theory, it wasn't the reality. After Casaselli got all the paperwork and permits together to get the business off the ground, he told Daily News that Burrell didn't seem to have any need for him anymore. He said, "She used me in a way, I think." Casaselli said Burrell didn't seem interested in any of his suggestions to improve the restaurant, telling him that people would come because she was a celebrity. The final straw for Casaselli was when he had 12 family members visiting and Burrell wanted them to order from a limited menu. After spending less than a year together owning a restaurant, they found that they couldn't work together, and their 12-year friendship went up in flames. Ann Burrell can be quite opinionated. If her reaction to team members on television and her past work behavior is any indication, working with her may not have been a walk in the park.
Tomorrow cook with dog food.
What?
That's her favorite ingredient.
What?
This is my favorite brand.
What?
If you've ever watched one of her TV shows like Worst Cooks in America, you've probably noticed that Burrell easily gets upset, especially when people don't get things right. An outspoken personality pretty much goes with the territory for celebrity chefs, but some viewers thought she occasionally took it too far. One Redditor said that they thought she was worse to people on Beat Bobby Flay than Gordon Ramsay tends to be in his shows. They said, "Gordon Ramsay can be harsh, but only when he's on MasterChef and they have it coming, or Nightmare Kitchens. Burrell attacks innocent competitors while they are cooking." And in 2009, Burrell was sued for how she talked to and about coworkers in a restaurant where she worked. As Eater New York detailed, she allegedly called female coworkers sexist slurs and had negative things to say about a coworker's cleavage. While there's absolutely no indication that the same thing was happening behind the scenes at Phil and Ann's Good Time Lounge, it's definitely a reputation that's hard to shake. The feud between the ex-friends continued with talks of dissolving their partnership and possibly closing the restaurant. There was a lot of he said, she said, with both claiming they couldn't get the other to have a proper conversation about the future of the restaurant after it started to tank. The two owners had previously talked about dissolving their partnership because of their inability to agree with each other. When they first floated the idea of Burrell buying out Casaselli's part of the business, Burrell started offering ridiculously low amounts to buy him out, according to Eater New York. Casaselli showed the outlet a screenshot of a text message from Burrell concerning what would happen if the restaurant closed permanently. It said, "I will be fine. You will still always be the miserable that you are." A week after the restaurant closed in March 2018, without warning, representatives for Burrell told Page Six that the restaurant wasn't officially closed, but that the differing business opinions between Burrell and Casaselli were irreconcilable. The statement continued, "Phil and his representative have been unwilling to meet thus far to try to reconcile the situation." Casaselli was quick to refute that, telling Page Six, "That's an all-out lie. I sent her a letter the Monday after Thanksgiving. I've called her, texted her, and emailed her, and she has claimed that she didn't receive them."